Hello, everyone. We are going to be starting here momentarily. Doo-doo. We always like to give a minute or so here in the beginning to let everyone grab their seats. And we'll get going. How's your day going, Michael?
Pretty good. Busy. A lot of new fellows applying.
That is great.
Yeah.
That is really good. So, one more minute. Let me know. Of course, this is the for I just installed Zoom on this new laptop, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. How about now?
Yep.
Amazing. Just fantastic. Probably something I should have done before we jumped into the call, but hey, that's showbiz, Michael.
Yep. Better now than ever. Yeah.
All right, we're about 1 minute past, so we're going to get going here. Thank you everyone for joining the meeting. It's a full meeting here today, full webcast. We had well over 100 people register, so thank you for signing up. If for some reason you are unable to stick around until the end, not to worry. This will be recorded and sent out after the meeting. And also, if you do stick around to the end, you're like, oh my God, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and you want to share it with other people, colleagues, friends, HR, feel free to do so. So, without further rambling on my part, why don't we get going? Welcome to the Build Fellowships presentation here. We're going to talk about immigration solutions for the world's top talent, likely most of you here today. My name is Ian Davis. I am the Director of Partnerships here at Build. I've been working in immigration, global mobility, international education for almost 20 years now. Um, and I'm joined by my Michael Cruz, my
Yeah.
colleague Michael Cruz. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Michael Cruz. I am an immigration lawyer by trade, but I've been working as the director of immigration programs at the Build for almost 2 years now. We have outside counsel that we work with to help us with the H-1B petitions and other immigration issues. But we in the immigration team manage that process as well as act as the touch point for all of the fellows and applying fellows that are coming into the program.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Michael. So today we are going to be covering a few things. First, we're just going to start with a general overview of H-1B visas. I'm sure many of you here today are very familiar with H-1B visas, but you're probably interested in finding out a little bit more about cap-exempt H-1B visas. So we'll start with a general overview. Then we're going to talk about some current events, namely lottery results and this H-1B proclamation. And then we'll go into talking more about cap-exempt H-1B visas and what we do here at the Build Fellowship. Along the way, if you have questions, you can throw them in the Q&A box on your screen. Michael's going to help me out and try to answer some of those throughout the presentation. We're going to cover a lot, and chances are we will get to a lot of the questions you may have. But if we don't, at the end of the session, if we have time, we'll do a little Q&A as well, right? And if it doesn't get answered then as well, it's a really hard question and we need to think about it. But we can also maybe send you an email afterwards. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. H-1B visas. The H-1B visa is the most common work visa in the United States for highly skilled, well-educated individuals from all over the world, right? It's one of the most sought after visas in the world as well. Um, they are given through the a lottery system. So many of you probably participated in this lottery system um, earlier in March and April. It's an annual lottery in which You enter yourself or your company enters you, and they quite literally are drawing your name to see if you get one of these visas, right? Um, this slide is outdated because this was last year's lottery selection rates of 30%, as we're talking about here in a minute. Um, this year, just most recently, we've seen selection rates at a lot higher percentage, and we'll kind of talk about why that is a little bit later in the presentation. But the basics of an H-1B visa, like how do you qualify for one of these things, right? So generally speaking, you need to have a bachelor's, master's, or PhD in a STEM or business related field, right? The H-1B visa is often known as a specialty occupation visa, right? It's not just a general thing. You kind of have to have a skill set, right? A highly skilled employee. So those degree requirements are typically there. Now, if you don't have a bachelor's degree, period, or you don't have a degree in the field in which you are working, depending on your work experience, you may be able to get what's called a workplace equivalency certification, which essentially shows that your experience in the field is equal to that of a degree in that field. Um, it's not super common, but we have plenty of fellows that have gone through that process. Um, but typically, you need to have at least a four-year college degree. You also need to have a job offer from a U.S. employer. This can be your own company, right? So if anyone here has started their own company or is in the process of starting their own company or would like to potentially in the future start their own company, you can put yourself into the H-1B lottery. In fact, last year, the modernization rule that USCIS passed made it a little bit easier for sole owners of their entity to put themselves into the lottery. Now, you have to meet some additional requirements for Department of Labor and things like that. But if you do have your own entity, you can submit yourself into the lottery. It's important, though, that the role at the job, at the employer, is in alignment with what you studied, like your professional background, right? So if you went to school to be a mechanical engineer, it's hard to make the case that this job as a website developer is going to be in alignment with your background, right? And so you kind of have to match things up there. Um, and as we mentioned, the annual lottery accounts for 85,000 of these visas. They do earmark 20,000 of them specifically for masters and above candidates. Okay. Um, so it sounds as silly as it really is. It's an arbitrary lottery system that occurs every year. Depending on the year, we've seen anywhere from, on the low end, 400,000 applications to the high end. Some years we saw 600,000 plus applications. So it's really kind of a crapshoot on whether or not your name is going to get selected. So this slide kind of outlines the general timeline in which the H-1B lottery takes place. So starting with the end of the fiscal year, beginning of the year, this is when employers are starting to kind of put together their plans for the following year, right? Budget season and things like that typically occurs around like October for most corporations, right? And when they're doing that, they're kind of evaluating roles, what types of hires they're going to need, internal candidates versus external, all of these things, right? This is where they start kind of preparing their organization for any type of like entries that they may make into the lottery, right? Come March, this is when the registrations window opens up. This year, I believe it was what, March 14th through the 19th, Michael, somewhere around there, right? It was
Yeah.
less than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And this is when the website, USCIS website opens up and companies can actually register their employees or their potential employee for the lottery. Okay. Then the lottery occurs. This year it occurred, I believe it was like March 29th through April 2nd, somewhere around there, approximately. And that's when the lottery results are being pulled. Now, the results are either successful lottery, it's pending, or denied, right? Am I correct on those three categories? Right. And those results aren't sent directly to the individual, they're sent to the employer and to the attorney who filed the petition. Okay. So if you're here today and you're like, my company put me in the lottery, but I don't know if I've won yet, probably not a great sign. But it might be a situation where they have the results and they're kind of waiting to determine if they want to move forward with actually filing the petition for you. Okay. But that we're a little bit past that now. We're April 29th today, so we're almost a month removed from the results being posted. Okay. So if you did win, between now and June 30th is when the company has time to file the I-129 form and the labor condition application, right? This is the actual petition for the H-1B lottery. So just because you won the lottery doesn't mean you actually are going to get the H-1B visa automatically. You still have to file a petition with USCIS. It has to be adjudicated, and then they process that. That's this next period here between June and September. This is when they're going to be reviewing all of these applications, right? If your application is successful, petition is successful, typically, that's a big asterisk next to that word. Typically, the visa is then issued October 1st. Okay. It can be a little confusing if some of you saw the lottery for this year was called the fiscal year 2027 lottery, even though we're in 26 and that's when you'll get the visa, but they do it a year ahead of time, right? So if all goes well and you won the lottery this year, you could have your visa by October 1st. There are things that can impact the or delay the distribution of that visa, right? Requests for evidence, things like that. We have had some fellows here who, contacted us in February saying, "Oh, I finally got my lottery H-1B approved from last year," right? So, October 1st is always the goal, but it can go a little bit past that. Okay. And then once you have the H-1B, you're working. Okay. So this is the general timeline. It's a full calendar year for most organizations that they're considering this, right? So if you are in, people operations, HR, mobility, right, you are well familiar with this timeline. If you are a student here who has maybe a year or two left on their OPT or about to start the OPT, this is an important time for you to be laying the groundwork and planting the seeds now for next year's lottery. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the news with the H-1B lottery and kind of what's different this year. So let's start first with this $100,000 fee proclamation that was made back in September. Okay. Because this is a very common question, and this is one of the key reasons why we saw fewer entries into this year's lottery, which means a higher success rate of getting your name pulled. Back in September, there was a presidential proclamation made stating that H-1B visas would be subject to $100,000 fee. What that fee is, if it's a tax or if it's whatever you want to call it, a gift to USCIS, wasn't a lot of clarity there. So the administration in the coming days, after everyone panicked and lost their minds for a while, finally made some clarity and said, okay, here's the deal. This $100,000 fee only applies to H-1B petitions filed for candidates that are currently outside of the United States and will have to go through consular processing to enter the US. Okay. So if you were in the United States and you have an H-1B filed for you, this doesn't apply to you at all, right? If you're here legally, you're F1, J1, maybe you're on an L1, any one of these categories here, and you have an H-1B filed for you, non-applicable. If you're outside of the US, that's where this fee would come in. Now, prior to the lottery, only about less than 100 companies in the world had paid this fee. Hasn't been wildly successful as this administration would have hoped, and it's facing some challenges. Right now, there are a few court cases challenging the legality of this fee. And court cases aside, when it was made, it was set to sunset or expire in September of 2026. Okay, so we're coming on close to the 1 year mark where this may be sunsetting. So for anyone who is in the United States right now, this $100,000 fee doesn't apply to you. If you're outside of the United States, potentially does apply to you unless you're able to enter the US on a different status prior to, when the petition will be filed. Okay. Michael, did I miss anything there?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay, good. So a lot of companies, they saw this fee and they're like, well, we're not going to put any candidates or less candidates into the lottery this year. Some of the big consulting firms in the United States who file petitions for, candidates outside of the US maybe reduced the number of entries they entered this year. Some companies just didn't know that it wasn't applicable to candidates in the United States, and so they didn't do that, right? Which is really unfortunate. And so because of this, we saw fewer entries into the lottery, which meant a higher approval rate, right? So if you did get put into the lottery this year, you had a greater success of, or a greater chance of winning. Another change here that we just went through is this year they made the lottery a wage-based system. So previously, the lottery was really as simple as it sounds. You get your name in the hat, everyone gets their name in the hat, draw the names out of the hat, right? This year, what they did is they made it a weighted system based on prevailing wage level. So what prevailing wage is that when a company is going to file an H-1B petition, they determine what the specialty occupation code is going to be. And this is based on your specific area of expertise, right? Your educational and professional background. Depending on the role, right? The role in terms of like entry level to most senior member, there's different wage levels for that specialty occupation, right? Level 1 through 4, typically. Level 1 being kind of entry level, level 4 being like you're the have 20 years experience in doing this, right? And so the change this year was if you are a level 1 employee, or if your entry was at a level 1, you get your name in the hat one time. If you're level 2, you get name in the hat two times. 3 times for level 3, 4 times for level 4. So what this did was the intention was the higher paid uh, foreign nationals at a higher wage level had a greater chance of winning the lottery, right? And the administration's logic was higher salaries, higher skills. We want to make sure that these people are taking a priority. Whether or not that's actually the case, we don't really know. A lot of organizations just simply bump the levels up for their entries. But that was the general idea. Across the board, we did see this year, we've talked to, within our network and our community, different law firms that filed petitions, and we saw, generally speaking, around a 55% of all entries being selected, right? Those at a level 4, much higher than that. I think the general consensus was around like 80, 85%.
It
Yeah,
was
somewhere around
75
there.
or 75 to 85. Yeah.
75 to 85.
Mhm.
Internally, our existing fellows, we had 50%. Is that right, Michael? Right around there?
52 in the end. It looks like we had somewhere between 51 and 52%
That's amazing.
of our fellowship chosen.
Right. So, higher chances of winning. Now, if you didn't win this year, I'm sorry that you did not win. I'm sure that hearing all of this about having greater odds this year than any other year and not winning is kind of like salt in the wound. But not to worry. We're going to talk a little bit about alternatives, namely the fellowship here in a moment. So let's dive in then to cap exempt H-1Bs. So everything I just previously described, the lottery system, right? Those are referred to cap subject H-1Bs. Now, why do they call them cap subject H-1Bs? It's because they cap the number of visas each year to 85,000. Okay, makes sense. Cap exempt is a status that can be designated to organizations in the United States. And so cap exempt organizations are not subject to the annual lottery. So what this means is they can be filed at any time during the year. And the visa itself does not count towards the cap, doesn't count towards the 85,000 total number through the lottery, right? Um, the same qualifications apply for a cap subject H-1B as a cap exempt H-1B, and the same benefits of the visas as well. So if you win the H-1B lottery or you have a cap exempt H-1B, let's say through the fellowship, same benefits. It's valid for 3 years. It can be extended for an additional 3 years. It's dual intent, and so you can go through the perm process, multi-entry, so you can travel, H-4 petitions for dependents, all of these things. Okay, so they're identical essentially. A big thing worth knowing though with cap exempt H-1Bs is that the prevailing wage level doesn't impact this at all, right? It's still something that has to be listed on the petition, but the wage level does not influence whether or not the cap exempt petition is going to be approved or denied. Unlike where the lottery, it had a weighted system, doesn't apply to cap exempt H-1B petitions. Okay. So there's four types of institutions in the United States that are considered cap exempt, right? Congress made this designation, and what they are is number one, the largest of all universities. Public universities in the United States are considered cap exempt. Okay. Then you have government research organizations, nonprofit research organizations, and then nonprofits that are affiliated with universities. Okay. So we get a lot of questions about the nonprofit side of things. Not every nonprofit is considered cap exempt. Okay. You really kind of have to fit into these categories and show, that status, right? It's not just given to you. Um, so, with all of these different types of organizations, there is a pathway for foreign nationals to hold a cap exempt H-1B visa through one of these four organizations, but then also work for a for-profit cap subject employer. Okay. And this is through concurrent employment. Okay. So, if you are employed by a cap exempt H-1B employer for at least 5 hours a week, any US employer that is hiring you for a role within your field can onboard you and hire you by filing what is called a concurrent petition. This concurrent petition is what allows the for-profit cap subject entity to employ an individual on a cap exempt basis. Okay. The legal foundation of the visa is the employment at the cap exempt organization, but by filing a concurrent petition, this person can also work for a for-profit company. Okay. So that's really kind of how the Build Fellowship works, right? We work with highly skilled foreign nationals, and we develop with them experiential learning projects that are based on their specific area of expertise. The fellowship, we have cap exempt status because of our nonprofits partnerships with universities. Okay. We're currently partnered with 16 universities across the US. And these projects that we develop with our fellows, they're offered to our university partners for students at those schools to apply to and participate in and study under these fellows as a way to gain some practical knowledge in a field that these students are going to eventually work in, right? So one of our fellows may have a, master's degree in computer science, and they're a software developer for an AI startup out in San Francisco. Students from schools across the US can apply to study underneath this person because they are also going to school studying computer science. And by participating in this project, they're going to get some practical experience in the field that they're going to work in, hopefully in the next coming years. Okay. So the fellow, the foreign national, leads this project for 5 hours each week, right? By doing so, they qualify for this cap exempt H-1B visa. The company, the primary employer for the full-time role, then files this concurrent petition, which allows them to be employed full-time on this cap-exempt H-1B visa. Okay. The cap-exempt H-1B visa is valid so long as the foreign nationals continues to participate in the fellowship and lead this project. You can't just get the visa and then quit the fellowship and transfer. It's not a portability thing to your cap subject employer. You have to maintain employment with the cap exempt organization to maintain the cap exempt visa. Okay. Now, the company can then put you in the H-1B lottery again next year. They can maybe work towards an O1 profile, start the employment-based green card process, anything to have an eventual long-term immigration pathway into the United States. These things are not mutually exclusive. So, kind of taking a look at the projects that we do with our fellows, as I mentioned, it's based on the individual's specific area of expertise. So, Michael and his team, prior to filing the H-1B petition, will work with them to ideate and kind of build the general framework of the project that they are going to lead, right? Based on their educational experience, their work experience. And what's cool about our project is it's really unique to the person. So if you are a civil engineer like Margarita here, we've got several civil engineer fellows. Every project that they are leading is different from one another because they do different things and they're working in different, offices for different companies, right? And so it's a great way to share your specific area and your focus with these students who are eventually, going to be working in the field as well. As you can see on the screen here, fellows have really detailed projects that they're leading over an 8-week period for these students to participate in. And here are a few of the schools that we are partnered with. We do allow students from universities not listed here to participate as well, but these are the schools that we have direct partnerships with. Last year, we trained just over 1,300 students from across the United States, and we had participants from 54 different universities. Okay. When it comes to applying to the projects, we give first priority to our partner school students. But if the project isn't filled to capacity, we do allow students from other universities to apply to and participate as well. Okay. Some of these schools you may recognize as some of them are more state schools, technical schools, even a community college. And so it's a pretty wide variety of students coming to the project. And our fellows are coming from real great partner organizations. They're working for amazing companies doing amazing things. Every day I'm on calls with employers and their employee talking about the work that they're doing, and it's just some of the most amazing stuff out there. And this experience is really beneficial, not only for the students, but also for the companies as well. A lot of our partner companies that have fellows in the fellowship love this because all of these students that are graduating from university, they're all eventually going to start looking for employment, right? And for a lot of our company partners, they view participation in the fellowship as like a talent pipeline for future employees as well. Because what better way to find someone who's going to be a good fit, who not only studied the field, but also spent 8 weeks studying underneath one of your employees doing the job or something similar to that, right? If you're interested in finding out or viewing some of these projects, you can go to hub.buildfellowship.com. A lot of great examples there. That's where our education hub lives. That's where students go to apply to these projects, but you can see a lot of our existing current fellows in the projects that they are leading. Okay, so a lot of you here today are probably here because you didn't win this year's lottery, right? And you're like, okay, now what? My OPT is going to expire soon. I need to find a backup plan, right? That is the most common use case that we have here at the fellowship, right? STEM OPT, third attempt at the lottery, you don't win. Now what, right? What are my options, right? There's various ways you can go. You can go back to school for a day one CPT. And it can be kind of flimsy. You can leave the US. You can look in for alternatives like the fellowship. Maybe if you have the profile, consider an O1, all of these different things, right? Um, the fellowship is something that can be done in a relatively short period of time, all things considered. Michael, you probably know better than anyone the timelines working in immigration there's no such thing as
Yeah.
quick on anything,
Like
right?
flexibility is the key is a sort of my signature line as I
Right.
meet every new fellow.
But generally speaking, the fellowship is a relatively quick process, all things considered. And so let's talk a little bit about timeline, because I'm sure many of you here today are like, okay, do I have enough time to make this happen? My OPT is expiring or my J1 or whatever it may be. So the way the process works is we first start with a general nomination, right? You can do this yourself, your company can nominate you. This is just getting your general contact info over to us in the fellowship. From there, we schedule a consultation where we talk with the employer, the foreign national, oftentimes the immigration attorney, the general counsel, the mom and dad, I mean, everyone, right? We go through the entire process, similar to what we're doing right here today. Once the conversation, we have the initial conversation, we then go through the process of document collecting, intake forms where we collect transcripts, diploma, immigration history, work history, et cetera, all of these things. We use all this information to conduct an evaluation. Michael's team, they take all of this information and they view it holistically to determine a few things. Number one, what would be the specialty occupation code that we would use on our H-1B petition? Number two, what would be the prevailing wage that we would associate with that role, right? And probably number three, most importantly, is there any reason USCIS would deny this, right? Because not everyone is qualified for H-1Bs. It typically is less about, oh, I've been out of status or I have this issue or that issue. Most oftentimes, one of the main issue is the job for the full-time employer not being in clear alignment with the applicant's professional and educational background, right? So that's kind of a recurring theme here, right? It has to be within your field of study. But we do this evaluation before anything else because we want to make sure that if we do move forward with you, there's going to be success. We don't move forward with cases that we have any second guesses about their success. Okay, I want to make that very, very clear. And we much rather tell you that before anything else, before we waste anyone's time or money. Okay. Once we go through that process, we go through contracting, invoicing, petition development. I'm going to break this down a little bit more detail in the next slide. And then that process, we go through petition development, filing the petition, getting it approved, onboarding into the fellowship, and then filing the concurrent petition. In general, the process from start to finish, from when we receive the intake forms to when the H-1B is approved, typically between 8 to 12 weeks, right? Can it take longer than that? Oh boy, can it, right? We can control what we can control, right? If everyone's rowing the boat in the same direction, so to speak, we can do a lot of great things and make, shave time off here and there. What we can't control is the federal government, right? There's always the chance that they can issue what's called a request for evidence, which doesn't necessarily jeopardize the success of the petition in our experience, but it can delay the approval. Okay. So this slide here is a more detailed breakdown of kind of what is going to happen from when the contract is executed to join the fellowship to when you start working on your cap-exempt H-1B for your employer. So as we mentioned earlier, one of the first things we do is uh, we do the evaluation, and after that, Michael and the immigration team work with the foreign national to go through the petition development process, right? This is where we're building the framework not only of the petition we're going to file with USCIS, but also the framework of the project that the fellow is going to be leading. Okay. Simultaneously, we're also filing what's called a labor condition application, right? This is done with the Department of Labor. That is a requirement to file an H-1B petition. Okay. It's basically intent to hire this person. This is going to be done by an employer if you win the H-1B lottery as well. Okay. So over, I would say, a 3 to 6 week period, that's when petition development is occurring. You're working with the immigration team to build things out, get everything ready to go. Once we are ready to file the petition, we file using premium processing. So what that means is USCIS has 15 business days to issue a response. Uh, Typically, that's an approval. Yay! Every once in a while, we do get what's called a request for evidence, right? And this is a thing that USCIS does sometimes arbitrarily, saying, hey, we need a little bit more information here, right? Sometimes it's completely random, and it adds maybe a week, 2 weeks to the process. Sometimes it can be particularly involved, right? It can add significantly more time. Now, we know going into the cases that would have a really kind of messy RFE, typically in advance, and we would, talk to all parties involved to prepare them for that. But this administration is issuing RFEs at a high rate compared to the previous administration, right? They kind of set the precedent the first time they were in office. I think at its peak last summer, USCIS was issuing RFEs to about what, like 40% of all the petitions they received, not just our petitions, just
Yeah.
across the board. Is that
And,
about
and
right?
ours are a bit more complex just because of the nature of the program and the cap exemption. So we see a little bit more, but like Ian was saying, there are about two or three different issues that are very common if we do see an RFE. CPT, if you were ever in CPT, that's a guaranteed RFE. Sometimes we see just sort of boilerplate RFEs about the job itself and the specialty occupation nature of it, or your background. Those are usually the three things, and so we've answered those many, many times, and so typically we could turn them around pretty quickly.
My favorite one was when we got an RFE, they said, you didn't include all the passport pages in the packet. And we looked, we're like, yeah, we did. They're like, oh yeah, you did. And that was it.
It's been I've been doing this for over 20 years. I don't know how many RFEs, probably every RFE has something in there that we've already submitted that they're asking for, so it's not uncommon.
Fun stuff. So that said, the RFEs don't typically impact the success of the petition, but it can kind of delay the process, right? But assuming everything goes as planned, the petition is approved in 15 business days. We then onboard you into the fellowship. And then you have to be in the fellowship for at least 1 day before the concurrent petition can be filed by the full-time employer. Um, During that 1 day period, that 24-hour period, the H-1B is active. The foreign national is legally authorized to work for the fellowship, but they're not yet authorized to work for their full-time employer. And so they have to take that day off unpaid leave, right? But what's cool about concurrent filing is that as soon as it's uploaded to USCIS or received by USCIS, if you mail it, the foreign national can begin working immediately. They're authorized to work on the H-1B while it's pending approval, the concurrent petition while it's pending approval. Okay. Now, if the concurrent petition is filed just with standard processing, that can take between 3 to 6 months to be approved. But that's okay. The foreign national can work that entire time it's pending. Um, so again, this is a little bit more of a detailed breakdown from start to finish. But if you are starting to inquire about the fellowship and this is something you're seriously considering, 8 to 12 weeks is a general timeline. Okay. Now, over the last 9 years, we've worked with over 300 companies that used the fellowship to retain talent and recruit talent. So the most common use case is a company has an employee that they want to keep, right? Because everyone knows, and maybe if you don't, you'll learn right now, cost of retention is always less than cost of replacement, right? There's a million articles out there that will show you that even if you have to participate in a program like the fellowship, the overall cost involved compared to replacing this employee is always going to be less, right? Because if you think about like recruitment costs, salary increase likely, loss of productivity, and then honestly, the biggest thing, institutional knowledge loss, right? That all adds up. Okay. So companies come to us to retain talent. Some companies come to us to recruit talent as well. They have somebody in mind that they want to bring on, and they need a solution. They don't want to have to wait until next year's lottery to potentially win and then bring them on in October, right? And this is a way to kind of start the process sooner. Um, Out of all the petitions we filed, we probably filed well over 500 at this point. We have a greater than 99% approval rate on our petitions we are being filed. And so I think the biggest reason this is that we are very diligent on the front end, making sure that if we do move forward with candidates, that they are going to be successful, right? If there's any reason we think USCIS is going to deny your petition, we don't contract. Okay. It's just a very simple thing. And then well over 5,000 students from our partner schools and all over the country have gone through the fellowship and learned from some of our fellows. Some of our existing company partners, you may notice some here. We have a pretty broad variety of organizations we work with, from fintech to biomedical sciences to engineering, finance. I mean, you name it, it's all over the place. And so if you are qualified enough for your employer to put you in the H-1B lottery this year, chances are you're going to be qualified enough to participate in the fellowship. Um, which leads to this slide about how do you qualify, right? Very similar to an H-1B lottery, bachelor's or greater in a STEM related or business field, right? We do, however, typically prefer candidates have at least 2 years of work experience within their field. And your time spent on OPT does count towards this, right? It just makes the case, not only with the petition, but just overall leading a project and working with students. We find it's just better overall fit for everyone. We do like our candidates to potentially have experience mentoring or working with students and or peers, right? Things like that throughout your time. And then also a job offer from a U.S. employer, including uh, your own company, right? So if you are a founder of an entity, you can absolutely use the fellowship as a way to work for your own company. And then financial commitment. I'm going to talk about a little bit more detail on this next slide here, but there is a cost that is involved with the fellowship. So the way the pricing model works is there is a fixed rate that the benefactor pays to participate in the fellowship. Okay. This benefactor most oftentimes will be the primary employer who's going to be filing the concurrent full-time petition, but not always. It is possible that the fellow can have what's called a third-party benefactor. This can be an entity that is owned by a friend, family member, associate, or an entity that you own yourself. As we mentioned, if you're self-sponsoring, like if you have your own LLC, something like that, that entity can act as a benefactor as well. But individuals cannot sponsor the fellowship, right? The DOL has a very clear rule that the beneficiary of the H-1B can't pay for any of the associated fees. We take it a step further and we don't deal with any individuals, right? We only contract with actual entities. Okay. So how the pricing model works is it's a flat fee that covers everything involved in the actual visa process for the petition for the fellowship. So all of the administrative fees, the USCIS filing fees, including premium processing, filing of the labor condition application with the DOL, all of the attorney costs to draft and file the petition. If we do receive a request for evidence, the response to that is included. If you have dependents that need an H-4 petition filed for them, that's covered by the programming fee. If you move and you need an amendment, if you reach the 3-year mark and we need to file an extension for your petition, that's covered. And then obviously compliance with USCIS, educational programming. And then when the fellow works at the fellowship leading their project, they are an employee of the nonprofit, and that is a paid position. They are paid for those 5 hours a week based on the prevailing wage associated with the specialty occupation we file on our petition. Okay. So what that means is you're actually going to be a W-2 employee from the nonprofit. You're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks or so. I don't know the exact cadence. You'll get a W-2 at the end of the year, these sorts of things. Generally speaking, most of our fellows earn between, I would say, $900 to $1,500 each month as a fellow. I'd say 1,000 is about an average, right? Um, so what most employers will do to offset the cost of the fellowship to them is they'll look at the amount that the employee is earning through the fellowship. Let's call it $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 annually. The employer, the primary employer, will reduce their internal payroll by $12,000 to offset the costs because now the employee is making that 12,000 from the fellowship. So the employee, the foreign national, is still making the same amount of money on the year. They're just receiving paychecks from two organizations to make it whole instead of just the one, right? So the company, by reducing the amount they're paying through their internal payroll, that's a cost saving measure, reduces the net overall cost of the fellowship, and in this scenario, from 4,000 per month to 3,000. If your prevailing wage is higher and the fellow's making, $1,500 a month, the net cost of the fellowship would be about $2,500 a month. Okay. It's important to note, though, the employer, when they file that concurrent petition, they also are designating a specialty occupation and a prevailing wage level. That is the basement at which this employer can pay the foreign national as an employee. It can't go below that, right? And so with prevailing wage levels kind of like being all over the place, a lot of times there's plenty of room to work with there to do a payroll reduction to offset costs. Sometimes there's not, right? And so that's something we would discuss in a consultation when we do our evaluations. Okay. Um, but generally speaking, this is kind of the standard process here for the pricing model at the fellowship. And then I just kind of like to wrap up always here with just like a real life example. This is Kataki, principal research associate. She works for a great organization, Foghorn Therapeutics. You can read what she wrote here right now. Um, we work with amazing individuals from all over the world doing amazing things. Many of them are employed by a private company. Some of them start their own entities and work for themselves all over the place. And so if you are in need for a creative solution because the standard traditional immigration route has not proved fruitful, this is a great way to do it. Okay. Um, I know that Michael has been typing feverishly over the last 45 minutes. A lot of questions were asked. I can't tell what's in the chat that has gotten answered or not. Michael, is there any that you saw repetitively that you think I should maybe address to everyone here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could go over the fact that yes, if you get a cap exempt H-1B, a lot of people have asked this question, you still qualify. I mean, you still can enter the lottery every single year. You still can win the lottery, and your employer can file a cap subject H-1B for you by June 30th, just like they're doing this year. And if it's approved before October 1st, you would transition out of the fellowship. Your last day would be September 30th. And that October 1st, the next day, you would technically transition to CAP subject H-1B status, and the fellowship you'd be offboarded from the fellowship. So that can happen sometimes within the first year that you join us. Sometimes we have fellows now that are going into their fifth year. They're just very
That's pretty
unlucky with the
uncommon though.
lottery.
Yeah.
And so, and if you talk to them, they're not upset that they love the program. Everybody seems to love it, but it's frustrating because their employers try every year, and meanwhile we have people coming and going. So other people leave the program because they get green cards, or they qualify for an O1 or an EB2 or something. So we see people leaving for that reason throughout the year, not just at the 9/30 typical offboarding date for the majority. We'll have about 100 fellows leaving this year, sometime around 9:30 or after. We have one fellow right now that has a cap case from last year that's still pending. So he's still with us even though he won last year. So we'll be here to bridge the gap even if it goes
Right.
beyond October 1st.
Yeah, and to use an old Midwest metaphor, I tell all of our clients to throw all the spaghetti at the wall and see what
Yeah.
sticks,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the idea. I believe the average amount of time spent in the fellowship is around 16 to 18 months. But
Mhm.
a lot of that has to do with the fact that we onboard so many fellows between now and July, like May through July, because that's when a lot of OPTs will expire, right? And then if you win next year's lottery, that's about 16, 18 months later. I think following on this, there's a question that came up that is related about transitioning from a cap subject to cap exempt, or cap exempt to cap subject, and the amount of time that you get on an H-1B. So as we mentioned, when you file a petition, typically it's 3 years, and you can extend for an additional 3 years, so 6 years total. Michael, can you talk about, is it 6 years for each? 6 years for
No, so
both?
it's 6 years total, all H-1B time, and some people have L time that's mixed in there as well. So L's count toward H-1B time, H-1B counts toward L time. But typically this question arises a lot. People think that, well, I'll just do cap exempt for a while and then I'll reset the clock. In order to reset the clock, you have to go outside the US for a year at least, and then you could come back in at some point and reset and get another 6 years if you qualify for another H-1B. When you're within the 6 years, your initial time that you're here, let's say you work for us for a couple of years, you transition to another employer, you are not far along in the green card process to extend beyond 6 years, you can recapture all of the remainder time in your 6 year period. So what we do is tell everybody, keep all of your airline tickets, keep all of your I-94s, print out your, travel log. We can ask for all of the days that you were not in the United States during your 6 years in H-1B, and then tack that on to the end. So oftentimes we'll have, petition for the last like 4 months, maybe during the 6 year period you were outside the US. That happens a lot. So you'll qualify for that. And then if you do enter the green card process with your employer, there are certain milestones in the green card process that you could hit that will allow extension beyond 6 years in H-1B status to wait for the very slow green card process to get through the system. So yeah, you'll have a lot of options. If you get to that point, though, you really need to be working with a lawyer directly to look for all different options and make sure that you're protected. Or if you're getting toward, let's say, the fourth year, maybe you're in the third year of your H, it's a really good idea to talk to your employer about starting the green card process.
That's right. I see a couple of questions here that I think I can we can do a little speed round here to go through them. Um, Someone asked, will the concurrent H-1B filed by my employer be lottery subject again? No. The concurrent petition is not subject to the lottery, right? The concurrent petition is you file it with USCIS, it gets adjudicated, and then it gets approved. Okay, not subject to the lottery. Um, Another person asked here, to confirm there's no prevailing wage minimum salary requirement for H-1B cap exempt visa. No, there is a prevailing wage minimum requirement. We do the evaluation when we start the process for our petition. We designate the specialty occupation code and the prevailing wage level, and the employer filing the concurrent petition does the same thing. Okay. The wage level doesn't impact the success or the chances of getting the cap exempt petition approved, unlike the lottery where it has meaning and weight to it. But we still, every cap exempt H-1B does have to meet that prevailing wage minimum requirement. Um,
Uh,
Go ahead.
Ian, we have a couple questions I've seen about, running out of OPT time. If you file during your grace period, or let's say we file, right now is a time, like Ian was saying earlier, when we get kind of slammed with people who are waiting to see if they won the lottery this year. They didn't, and now they're facing OPT expiration in June or July. And so we will obviously prioritize and try to get everything in and filed before the end of your OPT period. But you do have 60 days of a grace period, during which time, let's say that, it just doesn't get filed before the end of your OPT period. We can still file a change of status request for H-1B during the grace period, but you no longer have work authorization. And there's been a couple of questions that are kind of hinting at, like, if we file before the OPT expiration, does it extend my OPT? No, it doesn't extend your OPT. You'll still fall out of work authorization. It's not a cap gap scenario like you hear of with the lottery and the cap cases. Like, if you file it on time, you can extend through October 1st. It's not like that for ours. So we need as much time as possible to get that in and hope to prevent a gap. But if you do have a gap, that's okay. As long as the case was filed before the end of your grace period, you can stay in the US until it's approved, and then you'll be transitioned to H-1B status.
Yeah, and we got a kind of to add on that. Someone asked if we get an RFE and then my OPT expires,
Yeah.
you could stay in the US. You can't work until you have that concurrent petition filed, but you are able to stay in the United States during that period of time. Okay. Um,
We also have a lot of questions about whether or not, if I don't have a full-time employer, is it something I could still do? And the answer is yes. We kind of talked about this earlier about how, if you're building a company, let's say, and eventually that company is going to be sponsoring your H-1B, but maybe you're just not quite ready yet. It's not viable yet, and you want to work as a fellow for a while. As long as we have a benefactor relationship, then we can do that. And then if there's a change, or let's say you lose your full-time job, that's come up a couple times as well. We do have fellows who change to new full-time employers. It's totally doable, and it's actually quite easy as long as everybody is communicating and we can work with the new employer to take on the sponsorship role for the fellowship program.
yeah, we certainly do not recommend, and oftentimes we won't consider, participants who don't have an employer or even prospects lined up. Like, this is not something where you just self-fund through an entity and then you just don't have a job at all, right? Like,
Correct.
that's not something that's not the goal here, right? Um, but if you are doing so, every once in a while we do have somebody who's like, hey, I have job offers. I just need to have the H-1B to finalize this, right? That's a different scenario, right? And one of the questions here actually is relevant is about the prevailing wage and working for yourself. Okay. If you are a founder of your own company and that company is filing a concurrent petition for you, that company has to pay you a prevailing wage associated with that petition. Okay. So that's really important to know. As a founder of a company, oftentimes you're like, hey, I want to pay myself as little as possible through payroll, right? To maximum and just pay myself on profit dividends, these sorts of things. You do have to pay yourself an appropriate salary based on that, otherwise the Department of Labor will get after you on that. Okay. Um,
And there's one about if your full-time employer has their own immigration attorney, do they need to go through Build Fellowship's attorneys? No. So there are two
well,
different H-1B petition. Sorry.
yes, thank you. Clarify
Sorry.
that.
Yeah, there are two different H-1B petitions. Ours, we handle ourselves, and we have outside counsel that handles the build or one of our nonprofits, Open Avenues, H-1B petition for your fellowship role. We work with your employer and your employer's lawyer to help coordinate their filing of the concurrent petition. If your employer doesn't have a lawyer, and they're interested in working with us, we can certainly connect them with the law firm that we use, and everything can be handled with that firm as well.
That's right. A few more here. Most recent one, can I file cap exempt H-1B anytime during the year? Yeah. Yep. That's one of the biggest benefits of cap exempt H-1Bs is they're not subject to a specific time of year. Um,
And the question about does onboarding for fellowship happen once a year? So that's kind of the same question. No, it can happen. It's rolling throughout the year. We will onboard people, as soon as we get an approval. We can just be as flexible as possible because we know that a lot of times you're waiting to get onboarded with us for your employer to file their concurrent case and get you back to work full time. So we're very flexible when it comes to that.
okay. Um, Great. So I think we covered a lot of these questions here.
Mhm.
Again, this is going to be recorded and sent out. And so you'll get an email from us with this that you can certainly review, share with your colleagues, friends, employees. And if you didn't get a question answered, or if you just have a more detailed, nuanced kind of situation you want to discuss, reach out to us. The best way is to email us at info@buildfellowship.com. Um, Chances are you got an email from one of us already to invite you to this webcast, but if you email us, we can provide you with some further information, potentially set up a consultation, and go from there. So, yeah, I think we're right at about time. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining today. I wouldn't have been able to keep my head above water if you were not
I
here
was
with me
drowning in the
today.
questions too. So
Um, and thank you, everyone else, for spending some of your day with us. We appreciate it. And we look forward to working with all of you. And we wish everyone here the best on the rest of their day. All right. Take care.
thanks, everybody.